including, what I write specifically, you got to remember that everybody's got an axe to grind, And history isn't physics, I mean, in physics, the world pretty much controls what you do and makes you honest. You can't lie in physics. You'll be caught very quickly. But history isn't like that. You can lie for a long time and nobody will ever catch you. The reason is that, the intellectual structure of the field is not such that you got the real constraints of the outside world. So you pick and choose, You pick and choose from a mass of stuff and you pick what you think is important. And there's a lot of subjective judgment and there's a lot of ideology. And that should be understood. What that means is that anything that you read, I try to be as upfront as I can be about where I stand. There's also something called objectivity, which is a total fraud. And what that means is accepting the ideology of the established system. That's called objectivity. But you should recognize where somebody's coming from and what they think is important and what their values are and what they're looking for and so on and so forth. And then you got to compensate for it. And there you just have to rely on your own intelligence and understanding. There's no answer. And that's no matter what you read. That having been said, there are 2 points that ought to be made. One point is that the mainstream indoctrination system happens to contain a lot of information. It does for 2 reasons. For one thing, because there are people who have to know the facts, like business. Business has to know the facts. They got a lot at stake. And so when you read the Wall Street Journal news reports, not the commentary, when you read the news reports, they're probably pretty accurate. And the same is often true in the New York Times news reports. Now you've got to know how to read them, So you have to read defense of South Vietnam as attack against South Vietnam, and things like that. But once you understand how to read them, then you can get a lot of information out of them. And of course, you've got to read carefully. Like you have to compare today's lies against yesterday's lies. Or for example, you read government denials. When you read government denials, you're often learning what in fact happened. Quite typically, they will not refer to an event, but they'll refer to the government denial of it, and then you check back and you find it happened and so on. So there's all sorts of techniques for penetrating the major media. On top of that, you're of course better off if you read widely. So if you can, say, read, for example, the Manchester Guardian, even the weekly edition, you will learn things about, say, Central America that you won't read in the American press. It's like the British press. It's not because Britain is such a wonderful country. It's just that they don't happen to be the guys who are committing the crimes in Central America, so therefore they can write about them more openly. If you read journals like, say, The Nation, especially people like Alex Coburn, you'll learn an awful lot that will never be in the American press, or even if it's there, nobody's going to understand it. But he does, and or in these times, in such journals, we'll have things that either won't have, like for example, terror in El Salvador has been described in these times and in the Guardian, but not in the mainstream press. That's always been true. At the time of the Tonkin Gulf incident, for instance, which was a real turning point in the war, a total fraud. The government claimed that American ships had been attacked, and that was the start of the big attack in Vietnam. The mainstream press bought it 100%, but the Guardian didn't, and told the truth, in fact, and that turned out to be the truth. I mean, the New York Guardian. Of course, you always read those things with skepticism, like anything. But nevertheless, there are times when they'll report things that the mainstream press won't report, or they'll understand things that the mainstream press won't understand. But ultimately, I don't think there's any substitute for just diligence and intelligence and skepticism, a lot of skepticism. Now, see, that's one of the ways in which people are kept ignorant. You can have all the information there, but only a very small number of people are in a position to put forth the effort to try to figure out what's going on. You have to be very privileged, quite privileged, before you can even do this. You have to have resources, you have to have training, you have to have time, you have to have all sorts of things that most people don't have in order even to be able to figure out what's going on. That's one reason why the country is sort of safe in having a lot of information available. Only very few people are going to be able to get at it. And, that's why you need organization. I mean, if you can group together in organizations, you can do what individuals can't do. That's crucial. That's one reason why the United States has always attempted to block things like political parties or meaningful organizations in which people can participate, because that's the way in which isolated individuals can overcome the lack of resources, the only way.